Good morning, students. So in this session we are getting into a rather interesting, important part of the software development. Normally, when a user starts using a system, he makes a mental model of the system and expects the system to behave like that. So the user interface portion of a software product is responsible for all interactions with the user. Almost every software product has a user interface. But in early days of computer, no software product had any user interface. On those days, they used batch systems and no interactions with the users were supported in those systems. But now things were changed. Almost every software product is highly interactive. The user interface part of the software product is responsible for all interactions with the end user. And also an interface that is difficult to use leads to higher levels of user errors. And of course, it may lead to user dissatisfaction. So, user interface design plays an important role in the software development process. So, what may be the characteristics of a good user interface? It is important for us to identify the different characteristics that are usually desired of a good user interface. Because unless we know what exactly is expected of a good user interface, we cannot possibly design one. So, there are few important characteristics of a good user interface, such as speed of learning. A good user interface should be easy to learn. In a good user interface, we must avoid complex syntax and semantics of the command issue procedures. A good user interface should not require its users to memorize commands. So, some issues are crucial to enhance the speed of learning, such as use of metaphors. Speed of learning can be improved by the use of metaphors or initiative command names. And this can the speed of learning and interface is greatly facilitated if these are based on some day-to-day real-life examples, as you may have seen in several online or websites. Everyone knows how a shopping cart is used to make choices while purchasing items in a supermarket. So these are being used because the use of such metaphors or command names, initiative command names, facilitates the easy learning of that interface for the user. So, in any case, some use of some metaphors and initiative command names facilitates the speed of learning of a user interface. And also the user interface must be always consistent. Once a user learns about a command, he should be able to use the similar commands in different circumstances for carrying out similar actions, as we may see in Word, Excel, etc. So, some similar commands are used for similar actions. Almost all generic softwares use this way. The different commands supported by an interface should be consistent, so that it promotes the easy learning of that interface for the end users. And a good user interface must be always a component based interface. Users can learn an interface faster if the interaction style of the interface is very similar to the interface of other applications with which the user is already familiar with. So, this can be achieved if the interfaces of different applications are developed using some standard user interface components. So, there must be a standard component based interface so that the end user can learn it easy. If he is familiar with any other softwares, he could easily learn the new user interface as well. So, speed of using is also a criteria of a good user interface. Speed of use of a user interface is determined by the time and user effort necessary to initiate and execute different commands. This characteristics of the interface is sometimes referred to as productivity support of the interface. It indicates how fast the users can perform their intended task with that software. There is the speed of learning as well as the speed of usage, the time and the effort that is needed to do some task with that software. It is decided by the productivity support of that interface. Also, speed of recall is also an important factor. Once users learn how to use an interface, the speed with which they can recall the command issue procedure should be maximized. Speed of recalling the usage of a similar command issue procedure should be maximized in a good user interface design. Also, a good user interface should minimize the scope of committing errors while initiating different commands. The error rate of an interface can be easily determined by monitoring the errors committed by an average user while using the interface. Even if an expert user may commit errors, so while developing the user interface part of a software, it should concern about an average user who may use the software for his needs. The consistency of names, issue procedures and behavior of similar commands and the simplicity of the command issue procedures, these all can minimize the error possibilities. Also, the interface should prevent the user from entering wrong values. Apart from all these things, a good user interface should be attractive to use. An attractive user interface catches users' attention and fancy. So, graphics based user interfaces have a definite advantage over the text based interfaces in this case. And a good user interface must provide feedback to the user actions. And of course, it must support for multiple skill levels. A software may be meant for a beginner, or it may be used by an average user, or it may be used by an expert user. So, it must support for multiple skill levels. A good user interface should support multiple levels of sophistication of command issue procedure for different categories of users. As the software may be used by different categories of users, it must support multiple skill levels. And it must have an undo facility. While issuing commands, even the expert users can commit errors. So, a good user interface should allow a user to undo a mistake committed by him while using the interface. So, it must have an undo facility, error recovery facility. And a good user interface must provide user guidelines, user guidance and online help. Users seek guidance and online help when they either forget a command or are unaware of some features of the software. Whenever users need guidance or seek help from the system, they should be provided with appropriate guidance and help. So these all can be considered as characteristics of a good user interface. So some more basic concepts of user interface design. We discuss about some basic concepts of user interface design. The foremost thing while considering the user interface design is user guidance and online help. Users may seek help about the operation of the software any time while using the software. This is provided by the online help system. This is different from the guidance and error messages which are flashed automatically without user asking for them. The user must be provided with an online help system. A good online help system should keep track of what a user is doing while invoking the help system and providing the output message in the context dependent way. So it should keep track of the user, and the user must be provided with the messages or guidance according to that context. A good online help system should take advantage of any graphics and animation characteristics of the screen and should not just be a copy of the user's manual. It should provide the guidance in a context dependent way. And these guidance messages should be carefully designed to prompt the user about the next actions he may wish to do on the system, or about the current status of the system, or the progress so far made in processing his last command. So this guidance system should have different levels of sophistication for different categories of users. Apart from these guidance messages, error messages must also be provided by a good user interface. But these error messages should be polite. The message should suggest how a given error can be rectified. So these user guidance and online help, these are a major concept to be considered while developing a good user interface. Now let's see what is the difference between a mod based and a modulus interface. A mod is a state or a collection of states in which only a subset of all user interactions tasks can be performed. It is considered as a collection of all states. And in a mode based interface, different sets of commands can be invoked depending on the mode in which the system is. That is, the mode is any instant. It is determined by the sequence of commands already issued by the user. The system performs as per the sequence of commands that are issued by the user already. That is a mode based interface. On the other hand, in a modeless interface, the same set of commands can be invoked at any time during the running of the software. That means the modeless interface has only a single mode, and all the commands are available all the time during the operation of the software. So any commands can be performed at any time in a modeless interface. But for a mode based interface, the mode or the state of the system is determined by the commands issued by the users already. A mode based interface can be represented using the state transition diagram, where each node of the state transition diagram would represent a mode, and each state of the state transition diagram can be annotated with commands that are meaningful in that state. see what may be the difference between a graphical user interface and a text-based user interface. For sure, I am sure that you hadn't been ever worked on a text-based user interface. Let's see what is the difference between these two. Comparing with the graphical user interface. Graphical user interface are always considered to be a better option than the text-based user interface because it supports graphical user interface supports multiple windows and the user can work with different information simultaneously on different user screen, and this is perhaps the biggest advantage of a graphical user interface. So that the user can work with several related items at any time and can have access to different system information, and he can work with different windows simultaneously on the same screen. So working with different informations or working with different windows is the foremost advantage of a graphical user interface. It supports multiple windows at the same time. Also, the iconic information representation and symbolic information manipulation, it is also possible with graphical user interface. That means the user may be fancied or he may be facilitated more when he works with an icon rather than a text message. Symbolic information manipulation such as dragging an icon representing a file to a dash for deleting. The user need not have to remember any commands for doing such things. He can easily perform without any knowledge of software. He could easily perform by just dragging a file to a dash. So, iconic representation as well as the symbolic information manipulation is an advantage of graphical user interface. And a graphical user interface usually supports command selection using an attractive, and it is always a user friendly menu will be given on the system. And also it facilitates the usage of mouse or a light pen like that. Any pointing device, the usage of such pointing device increases the command issue procedure, and it facilitates the usage of the software. But on the other hand, the GUI requires special terminals than for a text-based user interface, because a text-based user interface can be implemented even on a cheap alphanumeric display terminal. For graphical user interfaces, it requires special terminals with graphics capabilities for running and also requires special input devices, but it provides more facilities for the user. Let's learn about the types of user interfaces. User interfaces can be classified mainly into three categories: command language based interface, menu based interface, and direct manipulation interfaces. Command language based interface, it is based on designing a command language which the user can use to issue the commands. So the user at any time is expected to learn and use the commands appropriately. Any error with the syntax in that command may cause an error. And some sophisticated command language based interface may allow users to compose complex commands by using a set of primitive commands. And among the three categories of these interfaces, the command language interface allows for most efficient command issue procedure requiring minimal typing. Further, a command language based interface can be implemented even on a cheap alphanumeric terminals. Also, the command language based interface is easier to develop compared to a menu based or a direct manipulation interface. But the command language based interface suffers from several drawbacks. Usually, all command language based interfaces are difficult to learn. It is a disadvantage. And it requires users to memorize the primitive command set. Because most of the users make errors while formulating commands in the command language and also while typing them. So errors are more common while using the command language based interface. So the main issues in designing a command language based interface are the designer has to decide meaningful mnemonics to use for the different commands. Although the command language based interface is difficult to memorize for an end user, it is also difficult for a designer to design commands in a meaningful mnemonic. The designer should try to develop meaningful mnemonics and be concise. That means the mnemonics must be in a way that minimize the amount of typing. No user wants to type much more long commands for performing any of his tasks. And the designer has to decide whether the users will be allowed to redefine the command names to suit their own preferences. And the designer has to decide whether it should be possible to compose primitive commands from more complex commands. So it is the choice of the designer to design the mnemonics in such a way that it will be easier for a user to remember, to memorize the commands and type the command. It's all about the choice of the designer. But in any case, usage of command language based interface is a little tough for an average user. Then coming to the second category of the user interface, that is menu based interface. You are all familiar with the menu based interface. An important advantage of the menu based interface is that a menu based interface does not require the users to remember the exact syntax of the commands. And it is based on recognition of the command names rather than recollection. It does not want the user to recollect anything here or it does not want the user to recollect or memorize any commands. And of course, in a menu based interface, the typing effort is also minimal, because most interactions are carried out through menu selections using a pointing device. This is an important consideration for an occasional user who cannot type fast. The user can easily pick up from a menu using the pointing device, using a mouse. So he need not want to memorize all those commands and he need not want to type it fast for performing his task. So it is an advantage of using a menu based interface. And in our daily usage, we may be familiar with some techniques that are available to structure a large number of menu items. Some of the menu items are scrolling menu. You are familiar with that scrolling menu, walking menu and a hierarchical menu. Let's see what is a scrolling menu. When a full choice list cannot be displayed within the menu area, scrolling of menu items are required. The scrolling menu will be useful when full choice list cannot be displayed in the menu area. And this enables the user to view and select menu items that cannot be accommodated on the screen. So in small displays, we can make use of the scrolling menu because the user can scroll scroll up the menu to see the full choice list. A scrolling menu is frequently used in font size selection. You are familiar with that? For selecting the correct font size from a scrolling menu. For example, a similar window is given in the figure for selecting a font size from a scrolling menu. So these facilitates much when we use a small display. And next is the walking menu. Walking menu is very commonly used to structure a large collection of menu items. In this technique, when a menu item is selected, it causes further menu items to be displayed adjacent to it in a sub menu. I am sure you are familiar with this too. In some generic software packages, we see the scrolling menu and walking menu. When we select a particular option in a menu, that causes further menu items to be displayed adjacent to it in a sub menu. When we choose a menu, it causes other sub menus to be displayed on the screen, and this is commonly used to structure a large collection of menu items. When there is a large collection of menu items to be provided, we can make use of this walking menu. An example screen is given. It provides a sub menu. When a main menu is chosen, when a main menu item is chosen, it provides a sub menu. And the last menu type is hierarchical menu. In this technique, the menu items are organized in a hierarchy or in a tree structure. It is rather a rare one in our day-to-day life. A hierarchical menu, a menu that represents items just like a tree, in a tree structure. Selecting a menu item causes the current menu display to be replaced by an appropriate submenu. This type of menu is not oftenly used. Selecting a menu item in this hierarchy, the current menu display will be replaced by an appropriate submenu. Thus, in this case, one can consider the menu and its various submenu to form a hierarchical tree-like structure. Hierarchical menu can be used to manage a large number of choices, but the users are likely to face navigational problems because they may lose the track of where they are in the main menu tree. So these are rarely used. This type of menu, hierarchical menu, is very rarely used in generic softwares. So these are the three main techniques available to structure the menu items. And the last one in our category is the direct manipulation interface. Direct manipulation interface presents the interface to the user in the form of visual mode. That is, it makes use of icons or objects. So for this reason, direct manipulation interfaces are sometimes called the iconic interfaces. The user issues command by performing actions on the visual representation of the objects. For example, pull an icon representing a file into an icon representing a trash box. We can drag an item into the trash box to delete a file. So it provides more facility for the user to learn or to perform his task. He just need to drag a file into the trash to delete a file. So he need not memorize any command, or he need not know about the syntax of the command, etc. The more important advantage of iconic interfaces include the fact that icons can be recognized by the users very easily, and the icons are always language independent. So any user can perform the task using icons. It is the important advantage of using the direct manipulation interfaces. So with this we learn a basic concept about the user interfaces, and we had a glance into the different types of user interfaces: the command language based interface, menu based interface, and direct manipulation interfaces. So we now learn about the characteristics of a good user interface, and what is a mode based and modeless interface, and the difference between a graphical user interface and a text based user interface, types of user interface, that is command language based interface, menu based interface, and the direct manipulation interface. In the menu based interface, we learn about the different types of menu structures. So all these are familiar to you, and you may have used all these things except for the hierarchical menu. This is not often used in any softwares. So we shall continue with the next session. Learn well. Thank you.